Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. I have been sewing and knitting the majority of my clothing for almost 5 years now, which is really crazy to think about. And today I thought it would be fun to share with you guys what I would do if I were starting from scratch, if I were starting over completely with sewing and knitting my handmade wardrobe, what I would do, what I wouldn't do, where I would begin. So if you're new here, my name's Rebecca, and as I said, I love making clothing, sewing, and knitting. I also love making videos here on YouTube talking about slow fashion. So if any of those are interests of yours as well, please do consider subscribing. And I'm just going to jump right into what I would do if I were starting my handmade sewing and knitting journey from scratch. I want to talk about inspiration because I think it's really important to have a clear vision of what you want to create before you dive in. And specifically, I would advise that you seek out inspiration for the type of garment or accessory that you want to make from places like brands that you really like, designers that you enjoy, stores that you would go into and be excited to make a purchase from, whether it's clothing or an accessory, something that you would go out and bring into your wardrobe purely based on aesthetic and style and material. And take your inspiration there before you look for a sewing or knitting pattern. And I say this specifically because I did the opposite. When I wanted to learn how to sew and knit my own clothing, I started on Instagram. I found the sewing and knitting community there, all of the indie designers that were sharing their patterns, and I was really influenced by the popular sewing and knitting patterns, the patterns that everyone was making that were really trend focused. Those were the patterns that I began making because I thought they looked beautiful on everyone else, and I thought, wow, I want to make that too, right? And so I made a lot of those trendy patterns. And what I learned over the years is that what is trending, particularly in the indie sewing and knitting communities, is not always compatible with or in alignment with my personal taste and style and aesthetic, and also what I find comfortable to wear for my lifestyle realistically. So what I would advise you to do is to take an honest look at maybe clothing that you already own that you love, or as I said, brands or designers that you are really in alignment with, like, oh, that looks like me, that looks like something that I would like to wear, and then look for patterns that are similar to those pieces. There are so many sewing and knitting patterns. There are, an infinite number of styles to choose from, and because fashion is kind of cyclical and what is trending sort of repeats throughout the decades, and because sewing and knitting patterns have existed alongside fashion for those decades as well, you're going to be able to find something that aligns with what you want to wear. You don't have to go and seek out today's popular sewing or knitting pattern. Start first with the garment. Start first with, do I want a specific type of jacket or a specific type of pants or a hand knit sweater? What am I really excited about wearing? Then find the pattern to match. Trust me, you will find something. This is particularly true now that the majority of our pattern purchasing is happening on the internet. It's easy to be swayed by trends, and I think it's important to take a broader perspective. Don't be so easily influenced, and think about what you will actually wear. Next up, a point that I think follows the first well is that your fabric or yarn composition, what it's made of, is more important than how much it costs or sometimes even what the style is. And I say this for a few reasons. When I began, particularly with sewing, but also with knitting, I was looking for the cheapest materials. And that's not always bad, but I didn't have the knowledge that I have now about how important the composition is of those materials. For instance, you can get really affordable natural materials like cotton or linen from a variety of sources, and those natural materials are going to hold up and wash and wear much better than synthetic material such as a spandex or a polyester or an acrylic for yarn. that may be the same cost as some of the more affordable cotton or linen or wool. For fabric and for yarn, you can find affordable options, and natural materials are going to last much longer. They're going to pill less. They're going to press well. They're going to look better long term. And whether you're shopping secondhand or in store or online, giving priority to natural materials at any price point is going to give you a better garment or accessory than an equivalently priced synthetic material. And as a beginner, they're easier to work with, in my opinion. So I would definitely pay attention to the composition of your fabric and of your yarn. With yarn, I thought when I began acrylic is cheaper, and typically it is, but there are really good, affordable 100% wool options. And I think the experience of knitting with wool as well as wearing wool is way better than with plastic. So be mindful of the composition of your materials. If you're thrifting fabrics to repurpose, things like curtains or sheets or large dresses or, that you're going to turn into something else, cotton, linen, wool, silk, these things will go a lot further in your wardrobe and are also a lot easier to sew with. My third point goes directly alongside my first two, and that is to be mindful of color. I think that when you are shopping for fabric and yarn, it's very easy to be excited by color and pattern. And there's nothing wrong with color and pattern. I enjoy both. But something to be mindful of when you're sourcing materials for your sewing and knitting projects is to have kind of a holistic view. Think about your wardrobe or your closet, not necessarily as a minimalistic capsule, but as something where you do want the pieces to go together, because you're going to have more outfits if you can pair your shirt with 10 different other things as opposed to just one really bold piece that doesn't really go with everything else in your wardrobe. You know what I mean? And I'm very much was guilty of this when I first started shopping. In particular, when looking for deals, I would go to the thrift or to big box stores and go through the clearance. And if I found fabric or yarn that was exciting to me visually, like first impression caught my eye, I would get it. And then I ended up making pieces that I didn't really wear. Whether or not the color suited me, I wasn't thinking about that. Whether the color or pattern went with other items in my wardrobe. When I began, I just wasn't thinking holistically about my wardrobe kind of as a collection of items that I wanted to curate that all were interchangeable and worked well together, as well as that worked well with my personal coloring. So yes, if you're just starting out, it's fun to get the bold colors and prints, but be mindful of whether or not they're going to work well together or with other items that you already have. I think that's a really good piece of advice that I wish I had when I began. Another point that I think is really important, both with sewing and knitting, is to learn about different finishing techniques. When I began, I had no idea what I was doing. You learn through experience. And I've definitely learned that paying attention to how you finish your seams when you're sewing can have a huge impact on how the garment looks, how it wears, and in particular, how long it lasts. I could say something similar with knitting, paying attention to your gauge, paying attention to how you care for your fabric or your wool, and how you care for and maintain what you have created, whether it's a garment or an accessory long term. There really is a lot of knowledge that comes over time that I think is important and I think would be really helpful for beginners to have before they even create, their first garments. So I would say do some research, look at different seam finishing options, use what's available to you. If you don't have a serger or an overlocker when you begin, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You can achieve really clean seam finishes without buying another machine. With knitting, I think it's important to learn about how to care for wool, how to wash it and dry it properly, how to depill it, whether you're going to use like a comb or an electric shaver, How to store your hand knits is really important. It's important to be intentional. It's important to learn how to care for the materials that you're using, because ultimately, if you're taking the time and the money and investing all of these resources into creating your own clothing, you want to have it for a long time. You want to be able to wear it for years to come. So just take a little bit of time and learn how to care for your materials. Those are just some of the tips that came to mind when I was thinking about what advice I would give to a complete beginner, or if I were to start over from scratch, kind of how I would approach it. To briefly recap, I would definitely spend some time building an inspiration board, whether physically or digitally, making a list of things that would get a ton of wear in colors and styles that are kind of timeless for you and your aesthetic, aside from what's trending and what the popular patterns are at the moment. Sourcing high quality natural materials is really important. They don't have to be expensive. I did a whole video on affordable 100% wool yarns a year or two ago. I can link that below. The same as said of fabric. You can definitely find affordable cotton, linen, wool. Take your time. Think about the colors and textures and patterns that you're bringing in. I love color and texture and pattern, but be mindful of how many different ones, what colors they are, how they work together. And also take some time to learn about materials and fabrics and how to care for them so that they last a really long time, either in your wardrobe or, someone you may pass it along to in the future in years to come, hopefully, right? So hopefully this video was helpful or interesting. Please do share in the comments below any other tips that you would give to a beginner, or any kind of tactics that you would take if you had to completely start your handmade wardrobe from scratch. I would really be interested in hearing what you guys have to say as well. And I think that's going to be it for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're all doing so well, and I will see you in the next one very soon. Bye.